It is now my pleasure to welcome Joe Williams to the stage. Joe is a design and experience leader focused on understanding business needs and delivering elegant solutions that drive value. Previously, Joe led the enterprise design organization for United Health Group and helped foster a consumer-centered vision for enterprise healthcare. Recently, Joe founded Lamppost, a solutions and innovation company helping drive design and transform companies of all sizes and domains. Please welcome Joe.
Hey, everybody. Share my screen real quick. Thanks for the intro, Nora, and thanks for the great event. It's been really fun to kind of get to this point and see all the speakers before me, and I hope we do it again. It's really awesome. And I had this whole space in my notes to introduce myself, but you did such a great job. So I'll just maybe add that, I'm Joe. I don't do a lot of public speaking, but when I do, it's usually something I'm really passionate about, and I feel compelled. And the design space has been something on my mind my entire life. I've been a designer professionally for over 25 years now, which is crazy to say. And so really appreciate the chance to have the conversation. I want to start though with a huge caveat, which is why I made it this big. Not that this is, caveat around the discussion and the space around what's going on with design, but the fact that it's me saying it. I'm just like a middle-aged, affluent white dude. And I only have my experience and kind of the cultivation of a lot of discussions and hopefully at my best, a diverse set of discussion partners and kind of thought around it. But I don't want this conversation for you or anyone listening or watching to be the beginning and end of this. It's well worth it, and there's an incredible amount of conversation out there. I'll cite some sources throughout this presentation, but please, share your thoughts, ask questions at the end, but also engage the more broad community, and certainly as we talk to each other, as we talk cross discipline, because this conversation is just as much for non-designers. Make sure, or at your best, hopefully, or at my best, I'm bringing grace and curiosity to this, because these are like incredibly kind of passionate, defining, identity defining topics for a lot of people. So with that said, what does it feel like to be in design lately? And I love this picture. I was just trying to find, this kind of metaphor for being stuck on the cliff. And I found this amazing WikiHow article about how to get out of a car stuck on a cliff. And there's a lot of great illustrations and advice in that article. If you can find it, it's linked in the PowerPoint. So, for me, in some ways, the Rorschach of all this is like, are you in the car or have you made it out? Like what are you, what does it mean to be a working designer in a moment in history where so many designers have been displaced? There's a lot of kind of creative energy in the wilderness right now, and there's a lot of internal and existential kind of frustration about the role of design. And the promise of what we call big D design kind of really seems in question for a lot of people right now. People who are looking for new jobs in design are often met with a lot of this kind of broader technology and development meta around layoffs and reduction in force. And then a lot of people who stayed, it feels like a lot of their permission has been challenged lately. So while we're on this screen, let's define design, because design to me is a big umbrella term around a lot of disciplines. And so there's certainly, digital product design, there's UX design, there's visual design, there's information architecture. But then, of course, I think there's like these more specialty roles like service design, content strategy, and design strategy. So I'm not listing an exhaustive group of disciplines, but just know that when I say design in this conversation, there's a lot of disciplines under that umbrella. And if you identify as a designer or design adjacent, then I'm probably talking about you. So let's talk about what happened. I think there's a couple of things. I came up with 3 kind of category areas that I think have been going on lately that I want to I want to talk about. And then some solutions afterwards. So this is not a, just to be clear, it's, it's snowing in April right now outside here. So I'm not going to let that permeate my enthusiasm to be here and talk about these things, because there's a huge upside, I believe. And again, the reason I wanted to talk about this stuff is because I think there's opportunity here. So I think in the one of the kind of main categories around what's happened is there's been this big exodus in design leadership. And there's a really great article. And in fact, there's now a series of articles at Fast Company around kind of what's been going on with design leadership. And Fast Company, as a journalistic concern, has access to a lot of design leaders and has been talking to and kind of cultivating like a more collective narrative around this. So I say, if you have the time, it's a pretty lengthy article. If you have the time, I suggest reading this article and a few other articles in the series that have come out. But essentially, I feel like, the higher order question is where we, in the last 4 or 5 years, we created a lot of chief design officer roles and a lot of like kind of what I call first generation design executives kind of took in, inherited those roles, and then in very quick succession, left, right? And so a lot of them left willingly, but a lot of, so too, others left, because there were reduction in roles. In broader design organizations have transformed and kind of started to fall under things like experience offices and product organizations, right? So, my question was, were design executives ready for the C-suite, or was the C-suite ready for design to come to the table, or was there something in the middle there, right? So, from my perspective, I think I have empathy for both sides of the equation. I think a lot of companies, and certainly in my own lived experience, both sides weren't quite as ready to kind of be in the room together in that way. And that chemistry, if it's prolonged, can be pretty dangerous, right? And so there's design leadership as it was recently. There's design leadership as I believe it's been evolving lately, at least in this kind of moment in history, right? Where it's more relegated to delivery spaces versus kind of strategic leadership. And then we get to design resourcing, right? So we've seen, some of the biggest companies in technology and experience significantly downsize broad delivery and technology and design organizations in the last 2 years, right? And then we also hear anecdotally or directly that very few hires are happening, right? If you click on a job at LinkedIn that looks remotely interesting, you'll see hundreds of people have already hired or applied to it rather. So there's the kind of unprecedented amount of kind of creative talent that's been unmoored lately. And then there's the kind of retreat to more generalist roles. So people like content strategists, service designers, researchers, design ops and design strategy, they're just not seeing themselves in these new roles that are being posted, right? And I think a lot of this has to do with this kind of existential dread or kind of becoming moment around generative AI and design and other disciplines. And so there's this big kind of wait and see moment around, how to hedge around design resources or other discipline resources. And, having been, a working professional for 25 years, it feels very analogous to, other moments of kind of technology disruption, right? Like the entrance of more powerful computing, less expensive kind of compute cycles, had transformed, the film and video industry and made way for things like YouTube and kind of digital content, right? And so it displaced, like, technology breakthroughs displace, what we once considered contemporary careers, right? Again, UX design did an incredible, almost like annual report on this. And they called it End Stage UX. And I think that's a very nihilistic title for the report, but I think broadly it's more hopeful. So I would encourage you to read that as well. And then the kind of in the triptych of all this, like the design status within these companies, it seems to have shifted from like companies that were once very bullish on kind of design at the table, design strategy, using service design and kind of customer experience architectures like that are led by design. It feels like collectively, are more falling into like, let's get back to fundamentals. Let's focus on screen UI. And, one of my theories here, and I'm certainly curious about people's perspective on this, is, I've seen in the last 3 years, as Figma became this ubiquitous tool, or even tools like Miro both of, to be clear, both of the tool, I love both of these tools, but they're so compelling and attractive to cross-functional partners that the insistence is that more time is spent, performing in these tools as opposed to the more broader kind of discipline work that makes like design more of a craft as opposed to a downstream service, right? And so many of my design friends who aren't necessarily built for kind of over the shoulder work struggle when, cross-functional partners are literally in their Figma file or their Miro files, kind of watching them work and kind of ready to leap in with a note at a moment's notice, right? So these powerful tools haven't been necessarily met with like the cultural transformation or the expectations. And I think something kind of really dangerous for design is at risk when we don't get to fully apply our craft because people are so compelled to watch us in these kind of more delivery focused, more output focused tools. So all that to say, design is having a bit of a moment right now, right? So the disciplines are being litigated and value engineered. And then us as empathetic, kind of sympathetic creatures in the world, and this isn't just design. I think this is true for everyone. Like the broader the world events, the economy, politics, strife, from the macro to the micro, right? We're feeling it. And again, that's true for everyone. So I don't, this is the end of the doom and gloom part of the conversation. So what are things that we can see, say, and do that can kind of help us? Like what's the kind of equivalent of self-care, kind of being in this experience right now from a design perspective? And then to our design adjacent friends in the audience as advocates, like what can you do as well? So I'm going to pepper in some of that into the broader conversation. So, and I also get to show you my favorite slide, which is the Papa John's logo, because I love saying better ingredients and better pizza, right? And so what that means to me is like, hey, there's things that we can do, to kind of change the recipe and kind of create things that might be better than we expect if we just start actually using like the kind of the best parts of what we can do. So just to be clear, I can't solve this in the next 10 minutes. I've already wasted the first 10 kind of setting it up, right? But these are a few things, and I kind of distilled them down into 3 things that I want to talk about, and then, just kind of contribute my part to the conversation. So the 3 things I see that a healthy designer, healthy design system, healthy design organization needs are partners, outcomes, and purpose. This isn't just for creatives and designers in the enterprise. This is just as much for individual contributors out in the wild, right? So if you're like a team of few like me, or you're an enterprise team like my old team, all these things resonate, hopefully. So partners, it's amazing what the difference between like doing the same task without feeling partnership and doing the same tasks surrounded by community can be, right? It totally informs your point of view, right? And so designers, again, any discipline in general, I believe, like crave partnership, but design, design creates collaboration through human centricity, and a side effect of that is delivery and innovation, right? So everybody needs collaboration and partnership, but design more than ever, right? And so what makes a partner? A partner are people who are as enthusiastic about their design partner as their design partner is as enthusiastic about them. And, and I say that, with empathy, and I say that with like this historical insight to my own experiences where, I've sat across from people thinking they were at odds with me, at odds with design, at odds with what was good. And eventually, as I grew as a practitioner and as I got over my own insecurities, saw that we were all like, on the same team. We were fighting in common cause for something good. And I just didn't have the perspective. I didn't bring the empathy that those people deserved at the time. And so, proud to say that, I think one of the things I've learned is to really look at people holistically, never default to someone as an adversary, and make sure that I'm ready to find partners, even in the most kind of undiscovered places. And so what I mean by that is you kind of have to put yourself out there, right? So you're seeking mature partners. You're, in a perfect world, in a less friction-free world, maybe you're looking for people who are already looking for you. I always say, like, show me a great product owner or a great tech lead who doesn't understand the trifecta of having a great designer, amongst them, right? I'd be hard pressed to meet a product owner who says they don't need design and a design partnership that can actually show me a great product that they're responsible for, because design is such a critical ingredient to those outcomes, right? And friends of, so when I say put yourself out there, one thing I think about is, a lot of times partners don't know what to ask for. So as a designer or design enthusiast, bring the voice of the customer to every conversation, whether people have asked for it or not. Don't wait for people to kind of put you on the spot to manifest your craft. Like, model the behavior of the partnership and the outputs that you want. And if you're a friend of design, if you're looking to make sure that you're a product or cross-functional partner, or even a client who needs a design partner, make sure you find room for them at the table, because not every designer is as bullish or as what's it called? So socially naive as me, that they just kind of push themselves into the table, so to speak, right? So outcomes, I think this is the most important hill for designers right now. And I think this is I think there's going to be a lot to say about kind of how design orgs have been built, how they should be built, and how they're measured. And so, if you got anything else out of this conversation other than my love for the term better ingredients, better pizza, tie design to outcomes and not output. We can no longer create design organizations or design value props that are measured by how much screen we can make, how much content we can write, how much blueprinting we do. What we need to do, and this is that dreaded, like, learn the language of the business thing, right? We need to learn how to talk about design in the context of outcomes. Design is such a partner to and essential to outcomes, but designers don't often have that language, or quite frankly, like design sponsors don't often even know how to equate their design organizations with outcomes. And so we get into these capacity paradoxes around, well, if we had more designers, we could do more. Well, if we had goals, we could do more towards those goals, and then we can actually scale our success and our investment in the design organizations by how close we are and how potent the design team is to those goals, and then we can invest accordingly. So a great example is, if you're in the retail or e-commerce space and you have a shopping cart, right? Design is so essential to getting people to find what they need, put it in a cart, and transact on it, right? That's not a value in how many iterations of screens we make or how much time we spend in Figma. That's a kind of a amalgamation of a lot of design disciplines coming together and bringing value and helping refine decisions and iterate into a seamless cart experience, right? Let's see. So my advice for designers certainly is contextualize the success of design through outcomes. So whenever you guys have a win, talk about that win, not just in the amount of work you did, but in how design was attuned to the values of the company. And then friends of design, recognize this hill and how you can help designers, help teach them the language of the business, or stand up for design when it comes time to do attribution towards outcomes, because design deserves that equity as well. And then, more romantically, maybe, purpose, right? Designers crave purpose. All people crave purpose, certainly, but, I'm talking about, design as a career path or as an output here, right? Design and human-centered design is a huge strategic advantage, right? Like, we have, at best, designers have a mandate to be that conversation and ideation fulcrum. And if you don't have that, and if you don't feel safe to discuss that with your broader organization, I'm worried for you, right? So I think, again, it's a very privileged space to kind of perspective to say this, but it's definitely true that designers can be working for the wrong company at the wrong moment in that company's life. And, professional atrophy is like a real thing, right? So don't languish in a place where design isn't valued. Do your absolute damn best to expose value, and definitely be tenacious, do it more than once. But you might be in a situation where it just makes more sense for that company to kind of play outside the model of design, or may not make sense, but that just may be what they're doing, right? The other thing I want people to think about is that design is a profession and a perspective. Designers don't always sit in design roles, right? And I think the best designers, the best product and strategists are often born from design. And so you can be stifled as a designer wearing the language of design in a company that doesn't appreciate it, but you might actually win or thrive if you transition into a strategy function, because you're still a designer. Your purpose is still to do great things and be customer centric, but you've just found roles and spaces that are more affordable to your life at that company, and maybe elevate you as a designer and a professional. And the other thing, as someone who's living this myself, is like there's a lot of destinations in the journey of your career, and it's okay, to move around. I was an enterprise designer and an enterprise design leader for, over 20 years. And only recently did I get into this kind of client services and kind of agency side of the world. And it's okay to try on different costumes and career modalities, just get out there and kind of find your audience. So, well, what else is there to say, right? So I've spoke for, I don't know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. I'm getting to the end. So there's a few more things I want to cover before we get to Q&A. One, excuse me, is that small is viable, and that small internal teams are highly potent. Independent teams as small concerns can do huge projects now. Like the cost of entry, the economics of like doing big work is no longer measured by people, and the cost of technology, we're all paying the same, Miro, Figma, Adobe Creative Cloud licensing, and that's a good thing. And so if you're looking for design support, some of the best designers in the world are already out there kind of ready to help. One of my concerns is there hasn't been a lot of innovation in kind of how to connect discrete designers and creatives together, but there's what's it called, like the social networks like LinkedIn, and like a lot of ad hoc communication going on. But my hope is that sometime soon someone is going to put together like an effective kind of design and kind of creative and product delivery network that'll allow you to basically, create ad hoc companies in minutes, right? And the other thing is, what's always true is that design matters no matter the economy, right? So smart companies know that design drives value. Companies will always iterate. I always say there's just the head and body problem, where a lot of times the head of a company, like the executive leadership, really understands the value of design or consumer-centered design or human centricity, but it takes sometimes years for the body to figure out those directions, right? Just one last slide here, just to think about, bring empathy to everything. Yes, of course, design is going through something, but so is everyone else. But if we don't communicate, extend empathy, and model the behavior we want, like, we're not going to get out of it, right? And free yourself from that capacity paradox. Like, don't get caught of, like, well, if we only had more designers, or we're 50 designers short, or 5 designers short. You have to reframe that conversation around the definition of success, and then you align design need to business success, and that should, woe to any, kind of business leader that can't see the value there. And then, many truths, we can hold them all together, right? Like AI and generative AI are disrupting our economy, our careers, but conversely, design will always be a way to engage and differentiate. And I think as things become more service-oriented and ubiquitous, the inverse will be true, is that design and differentiation will become the new battleground again. That's been true for several cycles in my career. So that's kind of where I wanted to end it, to make sure we had room for a conversation. And if you want to talk to me one-on-one, I set up a design catch-up in my Calendly. So find me there, and we can do like a discussion and keep the debate going. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was awesome. So we do have a few questions in the Q&A.
Yay.
Excuse me. The first one, can you give an example of an outcome you have used to tie design to and how it worked out?
Yeah, I think a great, even more generalized one than kind of cart conversion is something like time on task, right? So we have these kind of historical truisms of like, the longer it takes to do something, the less likely someone is to do it. And so if you can say, hey, like what is design doing to affect time on task? Because that is an established metric for a product, but design has a huge effect on that. And that could be from a content perspective, from a visual hierarchy perspective, from an information architecture perspective, from a kind of cross-channel communication strategy perspective, the cognitive load of saying like, well, I got a mailer that drove me to a website, but the thing in the mailer says something different than the thing on the website, right? So if we can, as designers, if we can hone into and take credit for shaving off all those microaggressions in that flow, we can actually materially affect time on task, right? And time on task leads to better conversions, which leads to more profit. So that's, I think that's a very kind of practical one for almost any industry.
Yeah. A follow-on on that, and similar question from someone else in the chat. When you think about agency or the consulting side, both what the work you're doing now, as well as you've hired agencies over the years, how do you think about outcomes when you might not still be there to see the outcome realized?
So I think that gets into maybe more romantically, like the notion of a designer or any professional as a craftsperson. In that, like, I want to be, I want to invest in the success of any client I have, even though it might be very small transactional moment, because ultimately I want to see their success in perpetuity, because because I think that's really cool. B, because I think the quality of my work will then be perceived as quality longer. And then I think it just, that you have these kind of reputational effects, and even even like kind of skill effects that are bigger than the moment you have. So you might make $5,000 helping a business kind of recognize usability or heuristic issues, but you can also exercise like that broader design strategy thinking and offer insights and advice that could either lead to them just being more successful longer, or them coming back to you because they, the value of your contribution may pay off 6 months, a year down the road, and say, oh yeah, like the way that was framed was so helpful to my company. Like, how do I honor that again? Right. And that doesn't, it's kind of like fishing with a lot of poles, right? Not everything's going to bite, but eventually, I think those have opportunity to pay off big. And then it gets also back from a consulting perspective, the power of referral, right? So any client you have has the opportunity to tell anyone they meet how good or bad you were. And so that kind of the equity you put into the moment you're given with them has a disproportionate effect, so you can either be like, well, I phoned it in and they only gave me this, or I was only asked to do X and Y. But if you can, I'm not saying give away free work, but if you do X, Y, and Z, or if you can do a great X and Y, then, they're more likely to share, you as a partner to their community. And those referrals are way more powerful than any advertising that you get to do. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. What activities do you recommend to burnt out, jaded designers to recover their passion?
A couple things. One is, communicate with each other, with the community. Again, the caveat being like, I don't think it helps you or your reputation or the community in general if you speak out in ways that you innately are like damaging or deconstructive, right? So, as a challenge for yourself, find a positive, empathetic way to frame what's happening. I go back to grace, right? Like the people that we are often at odds with, it's circumstance, right? It's education. It's not in the hearts of people to be cruel or at odds with other people, more in general, right? But if I'm a jaded designer sitting in a chair, and I've been that person, probably very recently, right? I try to seek community. So I reach out to friends, to trusted friends. I exercise through conversation, and then I try to reflect on, how I got to that point and what I can do to get out of it. I play a lot of video games too, if that helps. But
Gets those design and creativity juices flowing.
exactly.
Awesome. We'll do one last one really quick. What kind of graceful interview questions can help a designer understand whether a company has the infrastructure and values to invest in a great design experience?
So ask where design sits in the organization. I love this. I almost want to follow up on this because I have, a lot of questions kind of cached away for things like this, but certainly, where is design in the company today? What are the employee, if it's a bigger company, what are the employee experience index scores for that team? Do they feel seen? Do they have the equity they feel like they deserve? To be clear, like there's a position of asking questions to get the job, and there's a position of asking questions to learn more about the job. And sometimes those are in conflict. I think maybe the most romantic and maybe kind of safe question is, what would the company do without a healthy design team? Because it gives that person that's answering an opening to kind of let you know the health of the team. It doesn't look provocative. And I think you can actually learn a lot, either both in their answer or their non-answer.
That's great advice. All right. Thank you so much, Joe.